Welcome to Om Times TV, a division of Om Times Media and Broadcasting. Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. Did you know that during the war, World War II, the revered Indian philosopher, journalist, yogi, and poet Sri Aurobindo and his spiritual collaborator known as the Mother used subtle energy work to counter the dark, evil energies behind Hitler and the Nazis? Did you know that members of Carlos Castaneda's sorcerers group lived in a house in Mexico, which literally became magic because of all the power they had gathered together? These are just two of the fascinating facts revealed today by wisdom seeker, social scientist, sustainability practitioner, and self-confessed spiritual warrior in slippers, Thomas Legrand, whose spiritual journey began at the age of 23 with an encounter with native spirituality in Mexico, and went on to embrace the wisdom of a wide range of traditions and practices, including meditation, energetic healing, and Tai Chi Chuan. The author of the internationally acclaimed book, Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm, which puts forward a vision of an invitation to radically rethink our model of development and co-create a new development paradigm focused on being instead of having. Thomas Legrand lives with his wife and their 2 young daughters near Plum Village, the monastery of Zen master Thich Nhat Nanh in the southwest of France, where he is the lead technical advisor for the UNDP-convened Conscious Food Systems Alliance. Thomas Legrand, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Glad to be with you.
So, books, you said, have been such a part of your spiritual journey that at one point you had to stop reading them to be able to experience your path with a freer and lighter mind.
Yes, exactly. I've through books I've connected with a lot of different teachings and traditions, and really being nourished on my path, but also realizing the limitations of that.
So, as a book lover, how did that go?
With books,
Were you able to stay away from them?
oh yeah, I mean, a couple of months, or just not get out of spiritual books, because that was the point, so that I don't um, make my mind, more full of ideas about what is spiritual path or spiritual realization, and that I can rather experience, my own experience through a freer mind. So I probably, just don't read for a couple of months spiritual books, or just, read one or two, and took it a bit more lightly. But I never completely, let's say, went away from spiritual books.
Yeah, that's the hard one. I don't think I could do that either. So tell me, how easy or how challenging was it for you to distill your book list down to just 10 titles?
Yes, I could have added a few ones. I felt I missed a bit. There is something, I think it was a very interesting experience to bring together that list of 10 books. As I said, recapitulation of my life is including a spiritual practice in one of the traditions that I followed, Toltec shamanic path. So I took that as an interesting exercise to recapitulate my own life and spiritual journey through these books. I felt maybe there was some dimension that was missing. Maybe because there was not like one book that would represent that. Probably the poetry aspect, because I think that's also have nourished me very much. The poetry of, let's say, I could have one of Tagore's book, or in France there is a great spiritual poet that recently died, whose name is Christian Bobin. But yeah, I think it gave overall a good account of my own spiritual journey and direction. Yeah.
Were there any surprises there? I mean, did you stumble across an aha, an inspiration of some kind, something that you hadn't noticed when you were living through it?
Yeah, I did. I did reread. I think, yeah, two or three books of that list, small ones. I did reread, the first one, Journey to the East by Herman Hesse, which was the one I started my list with, and a book I read when I was 16 years old. One of the surprise probably also is because the last book was a Sufi book and based on a recent encounter that was impacting for me. And I noticed in that selection I had three Sufi Islamic book, which was, a rather strong part that stronger than I would have thought, let's say, in my own journey. And it did really, connected me very much with how my spiritual journey started, which is in Mexico with the path of the spiritual warrior and the book of Carlos Castaneda, for example.
Yeah, and that is the first book on your list, The Art of Dreaming, which you say you read when you were about 16?
Uh, well, the one I read when I was 16 was A Journey to the East, which is the first from
Ah, Journey
S,
to
which
the
is
East.
the first book on my list. And yeah, I think,
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct.
yeah, I was a bit young for the spiritual warrior thing, probably. But this Journey to the East, it was, like enigmatic, symbolic description of someone in the on the path of some kind of secret brotherhood that was connecting a lot of important names in the history of humanity. And I was really wondering what it mean, and what was that, because it was all symbolic and it was not clearly put, maybe expressed, that this was a spiritual path, etc. And for me as a young person, it looked a little bit I was staying with that question, what does that mean, and how is that path? So I think that was the first, kind of connection somehow to my soul through books with this question. There is something there that I relate to, but I'm not sure exactly what it is.
So, why did you read that book? Did somebody suggest it to you?
Good question. I don't even remember. I don't know how I got this book. I think I read others than from Herman S, but it was probably the first one I read from him, and I can't remember how it crossed my path. Yeah.
Hesse said that it was destiny that gave me that fabulous adventure. Do you believe in destiny?
Yes, definitely. I think there are definitely something on that we find on our path because our soul requires it, and I even think maybe a lot of things that our soul already knows probably materialize easier than some other things that our soul does not know. No? So I think there is a kind of probably a kind of a right, a soul right to be able to reconnect what is already part of us and that materialize in our life. Yeah, I do think so.
Yeah, I think that books, a lot of books, are actually reminders, and we don't realize that until after we've read them. But there's a familiarity about some of the concepts that they contain.
Yes, definitely. And for some people, they read a book and they don't understand much, or it just don't stay with them. And I feel like when I was, telling you I was reading at some point, especially when I started my spiritual path in my 20s and early 30s, I was, especially 20s, I was reading a lot of books before I, I decided to read less. And it was a lot of kind of download of, somehow remembering just things that I know already from inside. And
Yeah.
maybe that's why, you read a book and somehow everything is clear, simple, you fully integrate it from the beginning. Some other people read the same book and they don't remember anything, no?
Mm. So, book two on your list is The Art of Dreaming by Carlos Castaneda, which was published in 1993. Tell us the story behind that book and how it impacted you.
So that's an interesting story. Indeed, I was a student in a master's degree in Paris, and I was about to go on a student exchange for 6 months in Mexico. And I had a teacher in some course who was very special teacher, the kind of teacher that tell you, you're free here to talk about your last drug experience, this kind of in a political science school. So very special. And at some point he mentioned, he said, yeah, I was on initiatic journey in Latin America. We were reading Carlos Castaneda's book. And, I've never heard about Carlos Castaneda, but once at the same time, more or less, I was maybe a few days or weeks after, I was sitting in the metro in Paris, and in front of me, there was someone reading Carlos Castaneda's book, and it was called The Art of Dreaming, which I found was an interesting title. So I bought that book because I remember the name he said from Carlos Castaneda, and I was leaving to Mexico. It was probably, you know, um, 2 3 weeks before I was going to Mexico. So I bought this book, and when I arrived in Mexico, I started to read it, and I found out, wow, that's the craziest book I've ever heard. In terms of description of what they do with dreams in subtle realms. They're exploring whole huge realities, and they are telling it, with very details, as if it was true. Really, it's very detailed. So, and funny enough, a couple of months after reading that book, I did connect with some chamans in Mexico, which really changed my life. I was about to really recognize a spiritual path and recognize that was what I was looking for. And this group of shaman was really using the teachings of Carlos Castaneda, what we call in Mexico the Toltec teachings. And so, a couple of months after saying, wow, this is the craziest stuff I've ever read about, I was with that group, which maybe not doing, uh, as deep, as the kind of journeys Carlos Castaneda describes, but yeah, did some, using the same concept, the same and the same kind of work. Yeah.
Yeah, he talks in The Art of Dreaming about four dreaming doors. Tell me about those four doors.
Sure. So the idea is, and there is a movie that I feel builds. They don't quote Carlos Castaneda, but it's very much a little bit like that. Inception. So
Ah,
for those that have already watched this movie, so the doors are basically dreaming. Dreaming. Let's say some people knows about how do you say.
lucid dreaming?
Lucid dream. Yeah, the difference with what they call dreaming is that in dreaming, you become aware of your dream body. And that allows you, if you're lucid, you're kind of, almost like you're kind of watching it, like a movie. But if you're mobilizing your dream body, then you're into the movie and you can decide to fly, you can decide to do all these wonderful things that the dream body can do. And so that is basically going through the first door of dreaming, be able to awake within your dream body in your dreams, right? And I've asked, my teacher, shaman in Mexico, say my first teacher, how to do that. And he said, the main issue is to gather as much energy as you can and all this intention. And when you have enough energy with that intention, it will materialize. And it did eventually, just I think a few weeks after I went back from Mexico to France. But the second door of dreaming is basically awakening within a dream, right?
Oh,
So you
yes.
are with your dream body in your conscious dream, and you decide to lay down, for example, and maybe close the eyes, and at some point go into another dream where eventually you'll be able to wake up again. This has happened to me a few years after. No, let's say, yeah, not so, yeah, a few years after, as I will, or yeah, 5 or 10 years after, let's say, rather 10 years after, uh, as I was doing a lot of qigong and tai chi chuan, so energetic practices, and gathering a lot of energy, being also really in that flow of letting go what needs to happen once it happened to me. And in Castaneda, they say there are four doors like that. You can go in ever more subtle realities through this act of waking up in your dream body in dreams.
Wow. Have you gone through the other 4? The other 2?
No, 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 no,
No,
no.
no. Okay.
Not that.
You
No.
One thing I have to say about your list is that, you're really challenging my ability to pronounce some of these names. Book number 3 is The Sorcerer's Crossing: A Woman's Journey by anthropologist Taisha Abelard?
Taisha Abelard, yeah.
Okay, published in 1992. A Woman's Journey. Tell us what attracted you to this book.
Uh, I think that was very interesting to me. It's the account of how this Taisha Abelard was even started to be identified and even recruited by this kind of esoteric group of Carlos Castaneda. So I think someone saw her in a party. She was like quite crazy. You could see, I don't know, dancing, maybe putting herself naked or something. So, and they could recognize she had a lot of energy. She couldn't even control it. So at some point, they make even a trick to attract her in to come in the place where the group lives somehow. So even they say that these kind of warrior sometimes they can't you can't um, sometimes you have to use trick to bring them into the group basically. And then she comes to that house. She's having some teachings and inductions, and she's starting her spiritual journey. And what I found really interesting is because it gives a great account of a reality of these Toltec teachings, is that they are bringing together a group of, I think it was 14 people, if I remember well. And the group have, at each generation, the really, everyone in this group has a specific function, and they all have specific characteristics that the leader of that group can recognize and be able to identify these people. And then they work together to gather their energy and make things possible that are possible by when you are 14, that you are not one. My own teacher explained to me, I remember he said to me, if you're in a jail and you want to escape, you'd rather do that as a group rather than as an individual. You can do more things together.
The
So
power. Yeah.
and so I think that's how to live together as a group in this house. And as you said at the beginning, there is even a moment where she could go into self pity or something because it's too difficult for her, etc. And her teacher tells us, "Wait, if you're going that way, you won't be able to come back again in this house because the energy of this house will simply reject you." So there is this, the spiritual warrior path in that tradition is not much about self-pity or even so much even about they say even compassion is not necessarily helpful to even to others. So there's a very that kind of warrior energy, and it's very well reflected, and she goes through experience such as gathering her energy to be able to cross a wall, for example. Let's say this kind of thing, which makes can tell the house is pretty special. You can imagine. The other aspect of it, which I recommend that book, is for women, because it gives a great account of what is a woman journey, especially on that path of spiritual warrior, and what a woman has to um, undergo and heal and let go to become that kind of spiritual warrior. So I think that's also a great resource for women.
Well, that book is actually available for donation on the website archive.org. So if you can't find it on Amazon or the usual places, go to archive.org and you can probably download a copy there for just a few dollars. So book number 4 is only available in French. And my question, is why are you recommending this book to an English speaking audience, predominantly English speaking, if it's not available in the language?
Sure. So I keep it included because I felt, the exercise for me was to recap my own journey, and I felt these teachings were important for me. It's a book by Vladi Stefanovic, who founded the Art of Qi school. So that's a Tai Chi Chuan, Qi Kong schools that he founded, and in which I've been practicing with for, I guess, 15 years. And it's a great continuation of as I went back. I spent 3 years in Mexico learning from this shaman, and the spiritual warriors path for me has been very important. And I can notice that my soul is very much that of a warrior. And I think I tell in the somewhere in the list I said, even before I went to Mexico, I remember being in a live concert of an electronic music band, were famous, the Chemical Brothers. I was in Paris, probably around 2000s or something. And they said it was the best concert they ever did. And I remember after like 30 minutes, the concert has ended, people were still dancing, no? And at some point, I said to a friend, this is a warrior thing. And I don't know, he said later to me, there was something in my energy that reminded when I said that really came alive. So that is a kind of, thing that has told me. And really, that spiritual warrior archetype was really the basis for me to wake up when I was 23 in Mexico and start my spiritual journey. And I needed really this willpower energy to start transforming myself. And when I went back to Mexico, I found this Tai Chi Chuan school, which was really amazing. And Vladi Stefanovic was really a warrior also himself. I mean, he was initiated by a great master when he was 15, and I think that was probably 1940 in ex-Yugoslavia. And he's basically telling a lot of accounts of how he was a resistant against the Nazi. So he was always risking his life. And there's a lot of stories about how this, what he calls, or willpower, basically, and the will to live, which is most powerful Li, can really truly make a miracle. So he gives a lot of stories about how things materialize, how he got the right intuition, how etc. etc. Because he was so connected to that inner center from which we call it the Tang Tien
Yeah.
in Ara, in Tai Chi Chuan and Qigong.
So tell us the title of that book in French and what it translates to in English.
Yes, so the title is Médecin devenez guérisseur, which would translate, I guess, in English by Doctors May You Become Healers, because he was a healer himself. And so he was really using that kind of powers that comes from direct connection to almost inner center. And
Yeah.
that's where his teacher, when he said, he knows that he would be risking his life as a resistant, let's say, he just gave him an advice, when you need, just go back to your center. And that's from this center, the Tang Tien or Ara, that's what saved his life many times.
So book number 5 is The Synthesis of Yoga by Sri Aurobindo. This was published in 1948, and you discovered his work when you were on a trip to India in 2010?
Yes, in 2010. Yeah, I was doing some consulting work in India, which led me to travel. And at some point, I was in Chennai or Madras. And someone said I should go to Pondicherry. It was a French-speaking colony at some point, etc. And even funny enough, I remember at the last moment wondering if I should cancel it because it was a bit too far and I was very tired, etc. And I have seen that on my journey, that each time I'm about to make a big step, sometimes there is something that says maybe you should not go, or so I remember that. And yes, I went to Pondicherry and discover the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and his companion, the mother, going to their ashram in Pondicherry, and also going to Aurobindo, which is the community the mother created next to Pondicherry. And I did really find the teaching that feel, I would say, closer to my soul. And these are, and somehow it reflects also my past in terms of embracing a lot of different things. The teachings of Sri Aurobindo being known about as integral yoga, and this book is a synthesis of yoga, in which give a really fascinating account of all I would say, the different sides of the spiritual journey. And in India, they named them as, or spiritual paths, they named them as yoga. So it goes into the yoga of service, which is sorry, I'm forgetting the name. It will come back. And then the karma yoga, of course. Then the yoga of knowledge, the jnana yoga, the yoga of devotion, of divine love, the bhakti yoga. It goes a bit quick on Raja yoga, yoga of the mind, and Hatha yoga, yoga of the body. But it's these are universal aspects of the spiritual journey. He used the Hindu tradition, the Hindu concepts, and he gives a fascinating account of all these dimensions of spirituality. Basically, it's a universal spirituality in all these different facets, and what it means for someone to experience it at a psychological level, energetic level, spiritual level, etc. So you really he's telling you his whole experience of uncovering all these different aspects of spiritual development. So it's a big book. It's even I wrote it in 3 different books. You have 3 volumes. It's quite dense. So sometimes, if you're tired, you may feel, no, I don't understand anything. Sometimes when you're in it, very concentrated, you just feel, wow, this is amazing. So much richness in every sentence. And Sri Aurobindo really writes like Shakespeare. So basically for him, he's a poet. And he said, basically, I do poetry by, he's taking a vibration, as he said, and he's just converting it into words and sentences.
Yeah. Well, we're going to come back to Sri Aurobindo and what he and the mother did during the war, which is absolutely fascinating. But we'll talk about that after the break. You're listening to the No BS Spiritual Book Club interview, and sharing the 10 books that had the biggest influence on his life journey is wisdom keeper, social scientist, sustainability practitioner, and author of the internationally acclaimed book, Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm, Thomas Legrand. We'll be back with more from Thomas after this break.
Om Times TV.
Maya Angelou once said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and when I'm not hosting Om Times Media's flagship radio show What Is Going On and the No BS Spiritual Book Club, I help people share their untold stories. Books are my life, my joy and my passion, and there is no greater reward than helping aspiring writers get their books out of their heads and into the hands of those who are waiting to read them. If you feel that you have a book in you but don't know where to begin, visit sedgbeer.com, click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That's sedgbeer.com, sedgbeer.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Thomas Legrand, book number 6, another interesting title, A Spirit of Tolerance, The Inspiring Life of Tierno Bokar by Amadou Hampati Bar. I hope I pronounced that reasonably well. That book was published in 1980, and you said that this was a book that you found incredibly moving.
Indeed. I've worked and lived in Africa. Now, at some point, I was working with the African Development Bank based in Tunis and engaged in different projects, especially in West Africa. And I've very much connected with the traditional African wisdom. And Amadou Hampateba is, probably is a very famous reference for that, especially in West Africa. Students are studying his books in high school, and so he's a very well-known reference. He's a very interesting character. He was part of the colonial public administration at his time, in the early 20th century, we could say. And as he was going from an assignment position to the other, he was always collecting the oral stories of this place. So he became an important anthropological reference for all these ancient oral stories. And in this book, he is giving an account of the life and teaching of a saint, a Sufi saint who was living in Mali in the early 20th century. And he eventually became, I think, the successor of this saint in his lineage. So he was also deep into his spiritual Sufi teachings. And to me, I think it's very also this experience of being able to relate to this kind of people, whatever, in very different contexts, both geographical, historical, and being touched by, their words, their practice, etc. It makes me feel really connected to a whole line of people that are trying finally, in many different contexts, they are bringing the same light. So it really makes me feel connected to these different people, and I feel personally touched very much by. I think Mali is an important cultural and spiritual center in Africa and the world. And there are some, not in this book, but in another one. I think maybe a little bit in this one, not so much. But I've also been very much interested by what they call the hunters. So the hunters of a deep spiritual significations. There is a ritual, I think, to become a traditional hunter in West Africa. So you're part of it's kind of a congregation or an esoteric group, you could say, and they know how to read the signs of the forest, for example, of nature, etc. I went once to Bamako in Mali, and I've learned a little bit about that. And I think they gather in Bamako every 50 years or so, and it happened, when I was aware somehow of that, or just before. So it was quite present for me, and I'm once I was about to leave, even in Mali, I had an offer, a professional offer to live there, which I did not accept because also the country was starting to be war. But I remember even in dreams going there, and yeah, I mean that's another story. But there's some thing that makes me think that there is a connection with someone that is living there, or I'm not sure if he's still living or not, but because of some of the dreams, important dreams my wife has done, where she had, when she was 11 years old, she was received into a council, and there was a person which we believe is someone from Mali that was receiving her. And the fact is that 30 years later, we indeed meet someone she saw on that dream 30 years before, which had the same kind of dream, and she came in Plum Village to announce that she wanted to form a council, a sacred earth council. And my wife was able to recognize her as someone she saw on a dream 30 years before. So, which makes us think, these people, and we even met another people she saw in that dream. And so I think there was another one that is from Mali, from the Dogon, we believe. And I feel I've, somehow been called by that connection.
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting how these things happen. Yeah, we talked about destiny earlier, and there are some things that you couldn't arrange. Only fate can arrange them for you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. So book number 7, Al Sira by Mahmoud Hussein, 2 volumes and published in 2005.
So that's in Islam you have the Quran, you have which is words that the Prophet has received. There is a Hadith, which are what the Prophet Muhammad has said, sayings, and Al Sira are more the story of the Prophet. And in this book, I guess there are different interpretations, there are different ways to put them together, but he's a famous, I think, Islamic scholar, and he decided to put them together in that story of Al-Sira. And it's really the same. I was reading it when I was living in Tunisia, and so that was more, I was in the right context, and I could feel completely transported to Arabia in the 8th century, 7th century, right? And you have all these historical, anthropological aspects, even to start with, before, there's always, and you can imagine, there's always some prophecy. People are expecting someone to come. There is always one person that would like to be the prophet, but is not. And, all these kind of small details that you have as a story. And you can see even, you can really feel a human being basically recognizing that he's somehow being sent on earth by God and going through his transformation. And for him, it may have been completely crazy. And then to understand what was his message in this historical geographical context. And we tend to see often look at religion now, they are being siloed, no, but when you read that story, I remember there's an account where he's being served by a Christian slave, and he's asking, so you are Christian? And the slave is surprised. So the Christian, he said, yeah, Jesus is sent by God like me, is a friend, is a brother, and so that gives a completely different views on what is this message, not needed to be, then we put that in a box that we call Islam, or we call Christianity, etc. But when you read the lives of these prophets, you have a much more universal account of what has been their role and function, and makes me think also about the Baha'i prophets, where I loved also reading their stories. They're all very inspiring.
Yeah. And someone who, of course, is still inspiring millions of people around the world, Thich Nhat Hanh, who is the author of your 8th book, Love Letters to the Earth, published in 2013, I believe. And you said this is your favorite book by him.
Indeed. And you were talking about destiny. Well, I think, the way we came now, I live next to Plum Village, the monastery of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, where I used to live. We arrived with my wife 8 years ago, but the story is that the first day I met my wife in Costa Rica a few years before, in 2009, as I was coming from France, she said, there's a place I like to live, which is called Plum Village. So the first day we met, and then she rented me a room, and the first day we met, we lived together. So that's a funny story. And in 2014, as we were coming to Plum Village for a retreat, I remember on the way driving towards Plum Village, I remember feeling the calling. And later on, I realized that 3 weeks before, I had written in my diary that I could feel also that calling. And we arrived there. It was a Friday evening. And on Sunday morning, there was a gathering of the different hamlets coming together. And we had Thich Nhat Hanh, which I think was really at his best. And with this important chant in our tradition on the Buddha of Compassion, Avalokiteshvara, which is very famous. And, just realize that day that maybe, because then we have talking circles on the afternoon, that probably a third of the people or half of the people cried during that chant, because of all the, and I could sense that energy during that chant. And Sunday morning, and I said, wow, there is something that is going on here. We are in a remote area of France, but there's something really happening here, and I think maybe we want to be part of that. And we came back 2 months after. Thich Nhat Hanh was already sick. It was just before he did his stroke, and he was sick. And we said, well, it's here and it's now. And 4 months after, we started living here. So I really felt, something arranged by destiny.
Yes.
And somehow I choose also this book. It's a beautiful book, Love Letters to the Earth.
I think we've lost your sound, Thomas.
Oh, that's strange.
I
You
didn't
don't
hear
hear
what
me?
you said
Yeah.
then.
Is it back?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Okay. So, what I was on, it really feels like Thich Nhat Hanh, to me, turns Buddhism into a native, almost, I would say, tradition. So I can feel the same respect, belonging, love for the earth that I could feel in native spirituality. And it reminds me very much, I feel there's a lot of parallel between Thich Nhat Hanh and someone like San Francisco of Assisi. The simplicity, the emphasis on nature, on the community, on is also, we are chanting very almost childish, joyful songs, which I've seen San Francisco of Assisi was also doing. And Love Letters to the Earth. I mean, I work for the earth. I've studied my path on from native spirituality. So this is a beautiful book that shows our interbeing with Mother Earth that I very much recommend. And maybe I can add, because I had to choose only one book, and Thich Nhat Hanh is my most important teacher, and really he helped me also. I think I said I found in his teaching the medicine for my soul, because I needed, coming from this path of the spiritual warrior, I think I needed more joy and more ease, which are at the center of Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching. And I think I tell the story in that list about once I was in the bookshop in Plum Village, at the beginning of the time I was there, and somehow my eye was about to grasp a sentence on a book as someone was moving with the book, and it says, if you make your path a struggle, then it's not your path. So and I think, because as a soul, I'm very much connected to this spiritual warrior archetype. I also come to realize I also have this balance that come with it, and I'm probably, I would think, at a stage in my own spiritual journey where this is important for me to transform that warrior energy and bring more ease and enjoyment, which Thich Nhat Hanh has helped me to.
Hence the warrior in slippers.
Yeah, that's it. Because I was wondering how to qualify that, because I still feel very much connected to that warrior energy, which is part of me. But I have two kids. I work. I'm not, as I thought. Maybe at some point I thought I would be, working only with a group and being a, single person, just focusing on that that work of the spiritual warrior with a group of people. And it's not my life right now, but I still retain something of that energy and that wisdom but from a different aspect. So there's spiritual warrior in sleepers. Yes.
So, book number 9, The Light That Shone into the Dark Abyss by Maggie Litchi Guasi, or some people would call it Maggie, I'm not sure. Depends where you live. That was published in 1994. It is out of print, but I have seen that you can get it as a used book on Amazon. And we have probably about 8 minutes left. So we're going to have to move fairly quickly through this one and the next one, so that we can talk about your book. But this is the book in which the revelations about Sri Aurobindo's secret war against Hitler. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, just very quickly, and people can check more information. Aurobindo spent the last 25 years of his life in his own room, and he was basically working on subtle energies. I think he was trying to evolve the mold of the human body, so that as a species we could evolve into a different type of being. And they were working on Earth's, humanity's evolution, and they are saying we are in a big transition for that. And they saw war basically and the Nazis basically as manipulated by dark energies. And they did work a lot from distance with their subtle bodies on that. So, like supporting even soldiers on the field. There is some testimonies about that. Or, the mother said to Maggie that each day she was talking with Aurobindo, that was reading her the words he tried to put in Churchill's mouth. And then they were listening to the BBC, and they were hearing more or less the same kind of words. And we know, Churchill is a unique experience in history, how he has been able to, bring all his country against a Nazi and really make an important play a very important role in the Nazis' defeat. So I don't say much more. I invite people to check, but that's very fascinating, this kind of work.
It certainly sounds like a fascinating book, and I'd like to get hold of a copy of that and read it myself. So, book 10, A Journey Through 10,000 Veils, The Alchemy of Transformation on the Sufi Path by Sheikha Mariam Kabir, 2008.
So that's the last book I've read, and but I met Sheikha at the Parliament of the World Religion in August in Chicago, and it was very funny because I see that very as a typical kind of spiritual meeting with Sufi teacher, the kind you find in stories. So basically, she was having a booth where she was selling some clothes, and my wife was there, and I saw a pile of book. I look at the book, and I look at it, and then I ask her, "This is your book?" And as she answered me, I saw her eyes, and I saw such a light in her eye, and so many things I saw in that sight that, and I said something like, well, then I know it's a good book, no, from what I can see in your eyes, right? And we started to connect like that. We exchanged books, and I think she really mirrored me what I was looking for at that stage in my own evolution, which is really being connected with that joy and love of just being in touch with the divine, which she embodies very well. And this book is about her whole story, starting as a young EP, even in California, and then traveling the world, just being guided by voices she was hearing, and then going through very deep, um, how do you say, teachings with Sufi masters. So trainings, I would say, yeah, Sufi trainings. So yeah, definitely looks like the last important read on my journey, and encounter on my journey.
Mm. Well, that's your 10 books. Tell me about your own book, Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm. What was the inspiration for that?
I think the inspiration, I mean, from that moment, my spiritual journey started, let's say, in Mexico in 2002. There was this Mayan prophecy in that time, no? In Mexico, the first time I heard about it, about a change of consciousness in 2012. And so that was, really at the beginning of my spiritual journey. And um, somehow I've always been interested by how spiritual teachings can shed light on the happenings of the world and what we are going through as humanity at the moment, which I think is by basically being called to do that spiritual, cultural transition, change of consciousness. I was drawn then to the teachings of Sri Aurobindo that I've told about the spiritual evolution of humanity, etc. And to me, that has all, increasingly were the right lens through which to see, to interpret what was happening in the world. But funny enough, nobody talks about that much in the media, in the academia, in politics. And also, as I was working with UN agencies on environment, forest conservation, climate change, etc., I really came to the conclusion that there's little we can achieve until we really change the priorities of our lives. So this is happening for many of us at the individual level, but it also needs to happen at the collective level. And so in this book, I propose, I was basically, my main question was, what is a spiritual approach to politics, or let's say development, sustainable development? And I found this center, it's in the Earth Charter. Let's say when basic needs have been met, human development is primarily about being more rather than having more. And I found out nobody defines what being more means in theory or in practice. And I thought I felt called to write a collective book where I would give the framing of, that new development paradigm of the politics of being, and specialists from different spiritual tradition and different sectors would write what does that mean according to their own experience, traditions, etc. But I was not able to bring them together into that book. So at some point I said, well, then I will need to write it myself. So this has been a 10-year journey for me to write this book. The book has been launched on January 22nd, 2022, which was the day my teacher, Thich Nhat Nanh, the master Thich Nhat Nanh, passed away. And it has been really recognized as a breakthrough in the conversation of how we can bring that kind of spiritual conversation or vision into a mainstream political sustainability conversation, bringing the spiritual teachings from all different traditions, but also the science, because we now have a science of, let's say, happiness, empathy, compassion, peace. We know how to understand better how the life organizes itself, and we should organize ourselves in harmony with that. Systemic thinking, all the science on mindfulness and the effects of meditation, etc. So basically, these are the building blocks from these values, and they are field of scientific research. They are also at the core of many social change initiatives. And based on that, we can have a whole very concrete policy agenda in many different sectors. I have 9 chapters on sectoral chapters in the book, to have a very concrete, tangible policy agenda, mainly based on existing, almost exclusively based on existing examples. So it's both a very deep vision, very transformative, and it's also very concrete and feasible.
And let's hope enough politicians read it.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sorry that we're out of time. I will let everybody know that you and I will be doing an interview in the new year about the book, and we will be focusing completely on that. So if you want to know more, stay tuned and we'll let you know when that's upcoming. And we'll have time. You can really go into the subject then. Thomas, thank you so much for sharing your 10 best spiritual books with us and for joining us today.
Thank you, Sandy. That was a great opportunity. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Me too. So, Thomas Legrand's 10 best list can be found at the NoBSSpiritualBookClub.com, and you can learn more about his book, Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm, at politicsofbeing.com, and also about Conscious Food Systems Alliance, which he's very much involved with, at undp.org. That's it for this week. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Thomas Legrand.
Thank you, Sandy.